Halloween, 1962, when I was 10 years old, Soviet warships were steaming across the Atlantic with their payloads of nuclear missiles ready to be set up in Cuba, and at school we were having duck and cover drills, hiding underneath the desk as if that was going to help. Well, about that time we started having sleepovers at each other's house. We'd set our sleeping bags on the living room floor, and then we'd pop some popcorn and have a bowl of popcorn in front of the bag, and 11:30 at night we'd turn on the TV just in time to hear, "Welcome to Frightmare Theater!" And we'd crawl down underneath the bottom of the sleeping bag and pull the popcorn balls in behind us. We decided, I think because all of the things that went bump in the night, this Halloween we were going to be the scariest monsters we could possibly imagine. Gary was going to be the swamp monster from the Blue Lagoon with his slimy seaweed hugs of death, and I was going to be the mummy groaning with 2,000 years of dusty death. Rod was going to be the mad doctor. His father was a butcher and had this coat that was covered with blood and bile and stains, and his mother was a nurse, so he had a stethoscope that he wore around his neck. His only surgical tool was a rusty handsaw, because his friend Bill was going to be the patient with Excedrin headache number 201. And the doctor's only solution to this was to amputate at the neck. The only downer was that Timmy couldn't be there because he had chicken pox. Other than that, it was going to be a great Halloween. So I went to my mother and I told her what I wanted to be. Would you help me with my costume? Which she always did. And she said, "No way am I going to help you." So I went to my grandma and I said, "Grandma, would you help me with my costume?" She said, "Okay, but let's not tell your mother just yet." She got this old sheet and she tore it into strips. And then she got her pedal sewing machine and she sewed those strips together. And then she took me down to Newberry's Five and Dime and she got me one of these novelty swords that wrap around you so the blade sticks out on one side and the hilt sticks out on the other. And then she wrapped me head to toe with that sword, daubed some ketchup on both sides, and just then my mother walked in the door. She said, "Mother," to my grandma, "Mother, how could you make such a hideous monster?" And then she stomped out and slammed the door behind her. I said, "Grandma, do you think I'm hideous?" She said, "I sure do." I said, "Thanks, Grandma." Well, the next Sunday we went to church and we were sitting in our usual pew, my brother and I, my mother on one side, Grandma on the other, and Reverend Hollings got up to preach. Now, Reverend Hollings was new and he was bringing some changes to the church that we really didn't like. So he started preaching about how Halloween was a pagan holiday and good Christian kids shouldn't get dressed up like witches and ghosts and mummies. I remember he said mummies because my mother looked over at my grandmother and gave her one of those "I told you so" looks. My grandma got up out of the pew and stomped out of the church. I can still hear her orthopedic shoes stomping on the tile as she went out and slammed the door. She was still fuming at lunch. That Reverend Hollings, he wants to make everything so nice and neat, and it's just not so. And besides, she said, it's boring. And then she stomped away from the dining table. Well, my friends and I had big plans for Halloween. We'd always had a Halloween party at church. So this Halloween, we would have a haunted house. And we would have plastic bags where peeled grapes were in there and little kids could reach in and feel eyeballs. And there was slimy spaghetti that were intestines, and there were chunks of Jell-O for brain. It was going to be so cool. We'd wear our costumes and we'd have this haunted house. But we got a newsletter from church saying that this year we wouldn't have a Halloween party. This year we would have a harvest festival. And rather than get dressed up like witches and ghosts and mummies, we'd have the kids get dressed up like Bible characters. This would be, Reverend Hollings was writing, not only educational but inspirational. I took the newsletter to Grandma and I said, Grandma, I don't want to be a Bible character. The Bible is boring. She said, oh, no, Doug, the Bible isn't boring. I said, it is too. You said so. No, she said. I said, Reverend Hollings was boring. And sometimes he makes the Bible sound boring, but the Bible isn't boring. I said, it is too. And she looked really sad. And then, all of a sudden, it was like this light went on inside her head because I could see it shining out of her eyes. She said, if Reverend Hollings wants Bible characters, we'll give him Bible characters. You have your friends come over to my house next Saturday morning. I said, Saturday morning? That's cartoon morning. Never mind, have them there. Well, it wasn't easy, but I got them there, and she sat us down and told us Bible stories that had us sitting on the edge of our seats. And then she helped us with our costumes. The night of the Harvest Festival came. We looked through the window and we could see 25 kids dressed like Bible characters. There was Priscilla and Moses and Miriam and Paul and Peter and Elizabeth, and all these characters dressed with dish towel headdress, terry cloth robes, flip-top flops for shoes. You couldn't tell one apart if your life depended on it. And then we walked in. The fact is, we didn't change much about our costumes. You remember Gary was going to be the swamp monster from the Blue Lagoon? Grandma had made this bandage, put it around his head, daubed it with ketchup, put a sign around his neck that said Psalm 76:14, that tells about Leviathan, the sea monster, and how God bashed it on the head and then divided it up and fed all the creatures of the earth with Leviathan. Grandma had made these sugar cookies, the same shape and size as the scales on his back, and he was handing those out to all the kids. Rod was going to be the mad doctor. He traded in his butcher's coat for this velvet robe covered with stains. He traded in his stethoscope for a crown. He traded in his handsaw for an axe because he was Herod Antipas, who chopped off the head of John the Baptist. Bill was going to be the patient. He became John the Baptist. Grandma helped him button the coat up around his head and then daub it with ketchup, and he came in saying, "Repent, ye brood of vipers." Little kid stepped forward and said, "How can he talk without a head?" And Herod Antipas stepped forward with the axe and said, "I don't know, kid. You want to find out?" No questions after that. I came in dressed as the mummy, singing, "Up from the grave he arose," because I was Lazarus raised from the dead. But I'd gotten so attached to that sword, I didn't want to give it up. Grandma told me there'd be questions about it, and there were. So I told them what Grandma told me to say. The Bible isn't clear on just how Lazarus died. Timmy had chicken pox, so he wasn't there when we planned, but he ended up with one of the best costumes of them all. He was past the contagious stage, but he had scabs all over his body. Grandma put calamine lotion on him, little loincloth. He came in saying, "Thank you very much, thank you very much." He was the one leper out of the 10 who came back to give thanks. Well, Reverend Hollings saw us come in and went up to Grandma and said, "Mrs. Gibbon, are you responsible for this group of monsters?" And she didn't miss a beat. She said, "Reverend Hollings, I'm surprised at you. Is that any way to talk about Bible characters?" Bible characters? These are Bible characters? The word spread like wildfire among all the kids, and Grandma was the only person at Valley Christian Church ever elected to be Sunday school teacher. The only one elected to that high office by popular demand. That was Halloween, 1962, when I was 10 years old.